And welcome to a special edition of Chocobo Chasers. You know how much we love getting to do interviews on this program, and this week's episode is no different. Dash, Eric, and I are thrilled to welcome Jonathan Brousseau on the show today, a streamer, educator, gamer, game developer, among other things. This man wears so many different hats as it pertains into the world of gaming today. Jonathan can be followed at gamermanjohn_. You can see the progress of Eternal Strands, which is one of the titles that he and the team at Yellow Brick Studios are working on, which is also going to be shown at Future Game Show as part of Summer Game Fest. And you can find that on June 8th. It's going to be 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. So please make sure you don't miss it. Jonathan, it's awesome to have you on today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Dash, let's go ahead and let's get you kicked off with questions here, man.
So being a game developer, I have to ask, what was the game that made you say, yes, this is what I want to do. I want to get into game development because of this?
You mean actually before I start studying in game development?
Yeah, basically maybe something you grew up that kind of ignited the passion for it. What was the biggest influence possibly?
Video games were kind of always my my favorite hobby, I would say. As a kid, I think I was 5 years old the first time I get my hands on an Atari. So I grew up with video games, Atari, Sega, the NES, and all that stuff. And I think that that passion transformed when I was in high school. I would say around 15, 16 years old. And I would say it's probably with the first PlayStation and the first Nintendo 64. And those games are probably like the first Resident Evil title, the original one. Yeah, actually that game blew my mind. You know, that huge mansion, the corridors, the puzzle, all that stuff. It actually ignited something in me. And I was like, I want to do that stuff. I want to do something similar to that at least once in my life. And the other one on Nintendo 64, I would say, is The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. The dungeons in that game were incredible. Even if people doesn't like, and I know that's a big discussion out there on the internet, but the water temple is still a discussion today. But back then, when I was a kid, I was amazed and blown up by that temple and all the others, of course. But yeah, those two titles are definitely what pushed me to go study in the game development.
Oh yeah,
That's
I'd
awesome.
have to say Ocarina of Time especially is timeless when it comes to its level design. So
Yeah.
I love that you brought it up.
That's incredible. And so I mentioned that you obviously are part of the team over at Yellow Brick Studios. So what influenced your decision, or what drew you over to that team, as you know, in your developer journey?
That's a good question, actually, because as you probably have seen already, I've started my career at Ubisoft, back at Ubisoft Quebec, as an intern in game design. So it was totally different thing. And then after that, there was no spot open for me. So I jumped and I decided to start as a game tester. Well, I took the opportunity that I had back then. So I worked on a couple of games there during a couple of years, I would say 2-3 years before I had the chance to become a level designer. And then I worked on a bunch of games there with a bunch of really cool people. One of them was actually my lead level designer, which was Mathieu Otis, and that guy actually works at Yellow Brick Games. So we did discuss at some point over LinkedIn, and I was saying to him that after having been at Beanox after 10 years at Ubisoft, I was working again on AAA games, and I was kind of a bit bored of doing the same routine over and over, doing big project and the stress and the pressure and all that stuff. So discussed with him, and he said that he had the exact same reflection, and we continued discussing for a while, and at some point he told me, "Hey, Joe, why don't you come to Yellow Brick Games? There's an open position right now." So I just applied, and like that, we continued the discussion. I met a bunch of very cool people at Yellow Brick Games, and I fell in love with the studio, basically.
That's awesome. Eric, you wanna follow that up?
So this actually is perfect because you mentioned about working at Ubisoft for 10 years, but are there any like games previously that you had that you enjoyed a lot that you were a part of that you can talk about?
Oh yeah, definitely. Actually, and don't get me wrong there. I said that I was kind of bored of doing AAA games and stuff like that, but I really enjoy most of my years doing that. Like the first time that you're working on an Assassin's Creed is something very special. The first time that you kind of see then your name in the credits of those big games is something really, really special, something that you remember. So I really enjoy working on Assassin's Creed Odyssey in the last few years, but I think at Ubisoft, my best project ever was probably working on For Honor. That game was really cool. The reason for that, I would say, is that the mandate that we had in Quebec City was actually to do the exotic missions, the gold missions, or whatever they call them, but actually like the main story and the more complex missions. So we were not working on the multiplayer aspect of the game. We were just focusing on the story elements and the big missions in which there was like fire bombs and everything that were exploding and stuff like that. We were smaller teams, and that experience was really fun.
You worked on For Honor. That's awesome.
Yeah. That is
and
so cool.
Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I actually need to play that one at some point.
Odyssey is a really big game, a very long one.
That's what everybody talks about. Like the last Assassin's Creed I played was Unity, so I didn't play anything after that point. But so to follow up on that, what would you say are some of the underappreciated aspects of level design or game development that maybe people don't talk about much?
You mean as part of our work, or just like
maybe kind of like the stuff that you go into, like maybe designing something that people don't really think or talk about, and just
yeah. I think there was an example in the questions that you guys have sent me, and something that is really hard to tackle or to nail for us, especially in level design, is that when you create a level, people tend to get lost a lot in your levels. Yep. And especially since that's very special, because you work on that level, and sometimes depending on the size of the game or the size of the project or the time that you have to work on that project, you can work on the same level for several years. And after a while, I can tell you that you know your level by heart, right? So you know exactly where to go. You think everybody will think like yourself, and you assume that players will discover where to go by themselves. But more than often, players tend to focus on a little point that you completely forgot that was in their level, and what's in that direction? And completely forget where they were going before. And to manage to get the people where you want them to go, you need actually to work very closely with level art, with audio cues and stuff like that, to make sure that everything kind of appear in the face of the player where you want to send them. That's one of the things. The second thing I would say that players really enjoy, but do not realize how much work it is actually on the balancing, the difficulty of every single level, the progression through the entire level, but through the entire game as well. So some things that we do, again, when working on specific levels, is that we know our enemies, we know the mechanics of the game, we know how to do that. So placing an enemy there seems to be quite easy for us, but depending on the world that you're creating, the size of the area in which you place that enemy, the age where you place it, the gameplay ingredients surrounding it can change the difficulty factor like a lot. So that's something that we need to keep in mind while working on level design, and that is probably the point that we're updating the most, and until the very end of the project.
Awesome. Eric, you want to follow that up?
So you also mentioned that you teach as well, and you teach. So level design is your specialty, so you teach that a little bit. Is that your primary role with Yellow Brick, or does kind of like part of the development team, do you need to be like a jack of all trades for certain situations, or does everybody just kind of keep their own focus?
Actually, no, not at all. I'm not a teacher at Yellow Brick Games. I think, on the contrary, I learn way more than I can teach at Yellow Brick Games because I joined the team like in the third year of development or something like that.
Okay.
So I'm still learning a lot of things from people, but no, my teaching role is actually what you've probably seen on LinkedIn. Is I'm a level design teacher during the evening, like off work, and that's funny because I am actually teaching level design for the exact same program in the exact same school where I actually learned level design in the first place. So I'm giving back to the students, well, the things that I learned, and I updated the program accordingly to reflect what is the reality of the industry now, 15 years later. To continue on that, though, yes, especially in smaller studios or indie studios, we definitely need to be jack of all trades. So if you know, or if you can do something, you definitely need to teach that to the other team members, because everyone needs to be able to do a bit of everything, especially since the team is so small that you cannot just stop at, okay, I'm doing that level and I'll stop there. If I can help a bit in game design or in documentation or anything like that, well, I will, because that's part of being a small developer. Excellent. I don't know if I answered your question.
No, that answered it perfectly. That's exactly what we was hoping for.
Yeah. All right.
So let's talk a bit about Eternal Strands and what we've seen of it so far. So with the early preview that we got of it a couple weeks ago, looks like the big selling point of it is just physics and environmental stuff, how it factors into the combat and the gameplay. So what were some of the biggest challenges that you come across with that?
That's a very good question, actually. And yes, definitely, the physics and based combat is definitely the essence of Eternal Strands, I would say. The phrase "the world is your weapon" is really the biggest mark, I would say, that defines our game. So one of the hardest thing for us during that development is definitely everything surrounding physics and thermodynamics, because of course, while doing a game that has so many things that can interact with the environment, while you do the level design of this, or not even just the level design, but everything surrounding it, when we started, for example, to develop the fire powers, we started playing with this in our maps, but obviously our maps were not ready for that at that moment. So one of the funny examples was that I think it was one of our game testers that tried to burn grass, and then suddenly the entire map started burning. The full map, it was going through buildings and all that stuff. So that's defining and precising like the limit of what you want to do with those kind of systems is definitely something that is challenging for us. So yeah, I would say another thing is that I guess you guys are pretty familiar with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. I'm pretty sure that you've seen a lot of funny videos out there that people like exploiting the system and doing things that are completely crazy. So I would say one of the challenges is also like, since we're giving all those powers to the players, we want to avoid like having players getting outside of maps or inside the collision randomly because they're mixing two powers or a power and a weapon at some point. And that is things that can happen, but these are probably the biggest challenges we have.
Yeah, I could, with like recent games, especially like Baldur's Gate 3, where you give the player so much freedom, and then they come up with solutions that even the developers never even thought of. I think my favorite one was always stacking a whole bunch of barrels on top of each other and using an arrow of teleportation to get to a location. It's just like, no one would have thought of that before.
And that's actually something very cool. I mean, we don't have the scope of Baldur's Gate 3. We're not that kind of huge game, but something that is really funny, and I really hope that we'll experience that with Eternal Strands, is that player discover ways of defeating enemies or using magic in ways that we even didn't thought of before. So I would expect to see people like in the first few weeks defeating enemies and surprising us, basically. I hope this will happen.
Awesome. Eric, coming in with our second to last question.
That you mentioned Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, because when I first saw the trailer, I got like Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom meets Shadow of the Colossus vibes. I don't know if you played Shadow of the Colossus. It's one of my favorite games ever. And so are there other games that kind of helped influence this too? Because those are the two main ones that hit me. They're like, wow, this just makes me feel like I'm a kid again with watching playing Shadow of the Colossus.
Yeah, that's funny because you mentioned, well, probably both games that media are citing the most as influence for our game. And I remember that some media already called the game Breath of the Colossus. So, yeah. Actually, these are, we at Jailbreak Games, the entire team is really loving those two titles. And these are the biggest influence that we have for the game. When I first arrived at Jailbreak Games, Mike Lidla, that you already had on the show previously, presented me with the project, and one of the first few slides was the influences of the game. And of course, as you can imagine, we had Breath of the Wild, we had Shadow of the Colossus. Another one of the influence, I don't know if you guys know that game, but it was back then it was Dragon's Dogma.
Yep.
Okay.
Because of everything like climbing on creatures and stuff like that, and moving quite fast-paced combat and stuff like that. So, yeah, those are definitely the most influential title, I would say, that we are looking at. But I would add to that since we are a lot of veterans from the industry in that studio, a bunch of us are bringing like experience from their previous game development or even their gaming hobbies and stuff like that, and trying to add those experience to what we're creating right now. So there's a bit of everything in there, but yeah, the main three titles would be Shadow of the Colossus, Breath of the Wild, and Dragon's Dogma.
Awesome. It's the best ingredients from everywhere too, just to bring those all in.
As soon as I saw the trailer and I saw the giants getting fought, I was like, oh, Shadow of the Colossus. I was like, I need it. I need it right now.
And just a reminder, again, you can see more of Eternal Strands on Future Game Show at the Summer Showcase, June 8th. Again, that's at 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. So, Jonathan, for our final question, this one's more of an unwindy because, we talk with a lot of our guests who are gamers, and not everyone is, because not everybody involved in gaming is that big into gaming. I think probably more so from the level design perspective, from the dev. I think it helps to be a gamer, but from the actor's perspective, we've definitely ran into folks who, this is their job, and so this is kind of just what they do. So we kind of refer to this as your unwind game. What's a game that you like to play that you get to kind of turn your brain off a little bit, and it's just, you can play it for an hour or you can play it for 4 hours, but it's kind of your comfort game.
You mean one specific game or one type of game?
Let's say one specific game.
Okay. In that case, I would probably go with Resident Evil 1. Resident Evil 1 Remake, because I've played that game so many times that when I get back to it, it's just like getting on the couch and just relaxing, right?
That's incredible.
Yeah. And I do love a lot of horror games, and that's funny because I know that for some people, horror games are kind of stressful or they're not really relaxing. But for me, it's the way I win. I love those games. I love to just go into there and try to see how the developers try to surprise us or to make us jump, right? And if they manage to do it, like, wow, I want to know how they manage to achieve that jump scare and stuff like that. So, yeah, but definitely Resident Evil 1 is my on-win game.
That's a great choice. And it's funny that you mentioned Resident Evil 1 Remake. We actually interviewed the voice actor for Chris Redfield from that title actually previously. Joe White, who is probably one of the kindest people that we have ever talked to. And he's an awesome person. So we'll make sure to pass some of that feedback on, because I'm sure he'd love to hear it. But that's amazing. So I think that's actually everything that we had from our side. Do you guys have anything else you wanted to ask Jonathan, just while we've got everybody here?
What are your thoughts on Resident Evil Remake and remade again, since that seems to be rumored in the pipeline?
You mean the Resident Evil 1 remake?
Yep.
Yeah. I honestly, I can't get bored of this game, so I would take an infinite amount of remake if they want to make them. Especially if they try to do it like with the Resident Evil 2 and 4, like new
Goodbye, tank
camera
controls.
Yeah, exactly. I would take that. Well, at the same time, since I've played that much that game back in the days, tank controls for me are not an issue, but I do understand why for newcomers, especially people that are starting in the franchise, that Resident Evil 1, 0, and Code Veronica are like, you don't want to play those games, definitely because of the tank controls, but definitely I wouldn't mind another tank control game, but that's not gonna happen, right? They're gonna go with the over the shoulder, the new ARE engine and stuff like that. So
I think the Crow County game, that's kind of like an homage to old classic Resident Evil, Silent Hill type stuff. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that one, but that was a pretty good looking game.
No, I was not familiar. What was it?
Crow County.
Crow County.
Yeah, correct.
All right. I'll check that out for sure.
Yeah, it's another indie game that released. I think it was a little bit less than a month ago, so it's a pretty fresh new game, and definitely takes a lot of influence from the original Resident Evil titles, and it has gotten some pretty positive reviews as well. So,
all right, I'll look into it for sure.
The more you know.
Yeah,
the more you know.
Exactly.
There's so many games and so little time, right? So.
You don't want to talk about my backlog.
Yeah, it's immense is one word for it. But no, I think that's a perfect place to go ahead and close this one out. Jonathan, again, thank you so much for joining us. We absolutely love getting to do this, and we cannot wait to see more of Eternal Strands, which is also available to wishlist on consoles and Steam now. So be sure to do that, because you are not going to want to miss this one. With that, we'll go ahead and we'll close this out, and we will catch everybody next time.
All right. Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you.
Have a good one.